Hey, how's it going? And today I thought it would be fun to do a tutorial on basic color correction in Vegas Pro 21. I haven't done a video like this in a long time, so in a sense it's a trip down memory lane. And I just want to give you some general tips and tricks. Of course, there's a whole art to color correction, and books and books and books could be filled with hundreds of pages of how to do this, but this is just a basic workflow for color correction. I'm always leery of doing videos like this because there's always somebody that'll make a comment like, that looks horrible. This is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. To each his own. So anyway, I am shooting with a Panasonic GH-5, and I've done tutorials about this in the past. I like shooting with Vlog because it gives you the most dynamic range. So that's of course something that you want. And I always shoot footage with the highest quality settings, which is usually IntraFrame Codec. And I have done tutorials on that. I'll put a link in the description to how I set the camera up for the settings. I shoot in 10-bit 422, but when you bring the footage in, of course, it's going to look washed out and terrible. And one thing that's great about Vegas Pro now is that it comes with the LUT that you need to bring it to life, and you don't have to go get it anywhere else. It comes built into Vegas Pro, so that's really a fantastic feature. If you didn't shoot in Vlog and you just shot in a photo style, you could just bring it in and skip the step on adding the LUT. I've already imported the footage, and I'm just going to drag this onto the timeline like this, and usually it matches it up, and so I don't usually have a problem with that. And if we click here, you can see it here, how washed out the footage is. Now this is nothing spectacular. I just shot something in the backyard and I just wanted to get a couple objects with some different colors in them. I just did this on the spur of the moment. First step in Vegas Pro to color correct is we select the clip in our timeline and we click that little button there for color grading, and then this comes up. Normally I think it comes up, I have the RGB parade on here, but normally I think it comes up with the waveform. It's good to get used to using these waveforms and reading them because they are very helpful. So it just shows you. Now right now it's just the, I don't know if you want to call this like the raw or compressed footage because we haven't applied the LUT yet. So watch what happens when we apply the LUT. So that's the very first step, is apply the LUT. And it may be that you like the way the LUT looks and you're done. So anyway, I come over here to camera LUT, and this is great about Vegas. Look at all the LUTs they have in here, and it's the Vlog that I want. So I just click that, and right away the footage looks pretty good. So right now it'd just be a question of tweaking it, and I could render this out. Now I do have one caveat, is that when you're color correcting, you can adjust the white balance, and we'll take a look at that, but I highly recommend getting a white balance when you're shooting. Don't do it in post. It's just one extra step that shouldn't need to be done. All cameras now pretty much have a custom white balance, especially if you're in a mixed lighting situation. Go ahead and get a custom white balance in your camera, and then you don't have to even mess with that when you get into post here. Another thing that's great about this is that if you think the LUT's coming on a little too strong, you have the option here to turn it down a little bit and soften it up. But I'll just leave it at 1. I just want you to know you have that option to decrease its power if you want. Now the first thing that we do is I click on color wheels. There is a set of color wheels here for range limited, but we're just going to go through this. Now the neat thing about this is that it's pretty much your workflow, just going from left to right. And this would be your shadows, your mids, your highs, and then your overall if you want to do an offset. Rarely do I mess with the offset. Usually by the time I get to here, I'm done. And personally, I like to skip over this middle step first. I like to just get my lows and highs, and then I'll take a look at the mids. And I keep my eye over here on this monitor. And you'll notice like this thing right here is the cat. It's got really black eyes here, and it's got some darkness here, and we see that reflecting here. So this is, as we're getting close to 0, it's almost pure black or crushed black, and you'll see it crushed here. So if I come over here and I hit this slider there and I pull down, you'll see I'm pulling down, but notice as once I go beyond 0, I'm starting to crush. See right there where it bottoms out? I'm literally crushing the blacks there. Now this is strictly a subjective choice on your part, but generally speaking, you don't want things pitch black, dark. It's not really realistic because most people can see into the shadows. So you might want things contrasty, but you don't want your black so dark that they're completely 100% pure black. But it's a subjective choice on your part. So if you want to, these eyes and these, if we want to crush those, it's a subjective choice on your part. So if you want to crush a little bit, crush a little bit, but I would say don't get carried away. Leave it to where even in the darkest parts of your image, you can see somewhat into the shadows and it's not pure black. I'm just going to let it go to right there. I'm not going to get carried away with crushing the blacks. Now, the next setting is on the highs here under gain. My rule of thumb here is that we don't really want to go over 90. We want to keep the whites kind of subdued, and that's consistent with getting a cinematic look. We have some room to come up here, so if I drag on the slider, I can come up, and I'm just keeping an eye on the waveform monitor, keeping an eye on this line right here, and just seeing where I come up. And again, it's going to be on that cat. And it's like, how hard do I want to come up? Not that far even. Maybe like right there. I think that's enough. I don't want to go beyond 100 for sure. And you can see I'm already peeking out up there on that cat. But that's okay because that cat's super white object in the scene there. So maybe just come up a little bit on the highs. Now as far as the gamma in the mids here, I'm satisfied with the way this image looks here. So in the midtones, I really don't have any problems here with that. And as far as offset, I don't see any need to. The image looks properly exposed to me. So we've looked at the lows, the mids, the highs, and I think of the offset as kind of the overall exposure. And then, like I said, there is an option to white balance, and I'll show you how you can do that. Is we can switch from the waveform to the RGB parade, and essentially you want these three channels to, the basic structure of these three to kind of match and look the same. So looking at this, it looks like maybe my blues are up a little bit high, even though I got a custom white balance in the scene. So if I wanted to, on the highs here, I could pull this blue down just a little bit. So to pull the blue down, we come to the color wheel and we go in the opposite direction. So I would pull toward the yellow and see how it's coming down. I don't want to go too far with it, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. Not too much, just so I feel like, and maybe now the red's a little low. So you can play around with these sliders and try to get these images fairly evened up. But as you can see, they're pretty even right now. So, and that's because I got a white balance in camera. So I think the white balance is fine here. So I'm okay with that. Now the next thing, and one of the last things I like to do, is if we go to utilities, here we've got an option to add contrast and then also play with our saturation. But what I like to do is go to the color curves. I love the color curves. And what I do is I click on there and I just add the slightest bend in the highlights a little bit. Let me go back to the waveform here. Go back to the waveform. And I know I'm going to kind of clip out on some of my whites there, but I just like to maybe just push it just a little bit up. And then on the lows, I'm going to pull it down a little bit again. So I'm just adding a touch of contrast there, just making it a little bit more aggressive. And from what I can tell on my monitor, it looks great. Now, and again, a lot of this is creative decision. The last thing is saturation. So maybe that's too poppy, maybe that's a little too aggressive. So I can just pull down on the saturation if I want, and I think that might help a little bit. Maybe I don't want it looking that color, so I can pull a little bit of color out of it. And that's essentially the whole process. You've got, if we go back and review, we bring in our LUT, we do the lows, the highs, the mids, the overall exposure. Then we can go into utilities. We can either add a slight S-curve here or adjust the contrast here. And then we can look at pulling, or I don't think you want to increase the saturation. You might look at decreasing it a little bit. And then I think we end up with an image that looks pretty darn good. And then we're ready to render it. So when we're done here, I just close there. One thing I might do is come up here on my events, and I'll add, if I come in here to broadcast colors, I'll add that, and I'll click here and I'll just go, I think I go lenient 7.5 just to add that. for broadcast, if it gets broadcast. I'll show you my rendering settings. What I do is I come up here, I'll switch from 8-bit full range to 8-bit video levels, and this should help with any possible banding. I'll put this to best, and I'll go OK. And then when I go to render this, I'll go into render as. It'll put equal signs where it matches up. So I know I did shoot this in 60 frames per second, so I'll go ahead and select that one. Then I'll go into customize template here. I'll make sure this is set on high, and I'll put it on 2 passes, and I'll go OK. I think that's all I need to do there. And then I'll just give it a name and render it. And what you're looking at is the video that I shot with all these settings applied. So anyway, that's all I had for today. I hope you found it of some help. Take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.